45 days.
Some journeys begin with a suitcase. Others begin with a decision. Hers began with a single breath. At 6:15 a.m., on a quiet Monday morning, Mia stood in front of her office, building the place she had worked for almost 6 years, realized she no longer recognized the person reflected in the glass doors. Tired eyes, a forced smile, hands that carried too many expectations, and too little joy. She saw a version of herself that was constantly running, but never arriving. She had climbed the corporate ladder, hit every target, and earned every promotion, but somewhere along the way, she had lost her own path. The person staring back at her was a stranger, a ghost living a life that was technically successful, but emotionally bankrupt. The city buzzed around her, a symphony of ambition and haste, but for Mia, it was just noise. The hum of the traffic, the chatter of early commuters, the distant wail of a siren, it all felt like a soundtrack to a life she didn't want to live anymore. Without a word, without a single hesitation, she turned around, walked home, and typed a short, simple message to her boss. I quit. There was no lengthy explanation, no apologies, no 2-week notice, just 2 words that held the weight of 1,000 unsaid feelings. Hitting send felt less like an ending and more like unlocking a cage. A wave of both terror and exhilarating freedom washed over her. For years, she had dreamed of this moment, rehearsed it in her mind during late-night work sessions and stressful meetings. But it had always felt like a distant fantasy, a one day that would never come. Today, one day had arrived. That afternoon, with her old life packed away in a single digital message, she booked a one-way train ticket. No grand plan, no color-coded itinerary, no deadlines, just a 45-day journey across the country. It was an arbitrary number she had plucked from the air, long enough to feel significant, but short enough to not feel overwhelming. Her destination was simply away. She pictured beaches, mountains, forgotten small towns, and long, dusty roads stretching into the horizon. This wasn't a vacation. It was an escape, an exodus, a journey to outrun her exhaustion. Or maybe, just maybe, to find something she had lost along the way. She packed a small bag with only the essentials, a few books she'd always meant to read, a journal with empty pages, and a camera to capture moments, not for social media, but for herself. When the train pulled away from the station, the slow, steady chug of the engine felt like a heartbeat starting anew. Mia felt a physical sensation of weight sliding off her shoulders, a burden she didn't even realize she was carrying until it was gone. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, letting the wind whip through her hair. The soft chatter of fellow passengers, the rhythmic clatter of the trackset was all a gentle lullaby, a stark contrast to the sharp, demanding ring of her office phone. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she breathed without pressure. Each inhale was deep and full. Each exhale, a release of years of pent-up tension. A man sat in the seat across the aisle from her. He was hunched over a large, crinkled paper map, his brow furrowed in a slightly confused expression. He was tall, even sitting down, with kind, warm eyes and a quiet, unassuming presence. He seemed out of place in a world of GPS and smartphones, a traveler from a different era. He looked up, his eyes briefly meeting hers, and he offered a small, shy smile before returning his attention to the tangled lines of the map. Mia smiled back, a genuine, unforced smile, and then turned her gaze back to the window. She didn't know it yet, couldn't possibly know it. But this man, this stranger with a map, would appear again and again throughout her trip. Not by intention, not by any fate she could understand. Just 2 separate stories, 2 parallel journeys, quietly running side by side, destined to intersect in the most unexpected ways. During that first day on the train, Mia did nothing but watch the world go by. She watched the sprawling cityscape with its towering skyscrapers and concrete arteries slowly dissolve into gentle, rolling suburbs. The suburbs then bled into vast, open fields, painted in shades of green and gold. The fields eventually melted into a dramatic, rugged coastline, where the ocean met the land in a constant, soothing dance. With every mile that passed, she felt like she was peeling away another layer of her old self, shedding the skin of the person she was pretending to be. The Mia from the office, the one who lived on caffeine and deadlines, was fading with the landscape. She took out her journal, the pen hovering over the first blank page. What do you write when you're starting over? She simply wrote down the date, and then a single thought whispered to herself, maybe this is how I begin again. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange, pink, and purple, she noticed the man across the aisle was also looking out the window, watching the same spectacular sunset. A shared moment of silent awe. A connection unspoken between two strangers. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them knew how deeply and beautifully intertwined their 45-day journeys would soon become. As the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, plunging the world into a soft, dusky twilight, Mia closed her eyes. The gentle rocking of the train, the hum of the wheels on the track, the feeling of infinite possibility stretching out before her. The journey had just begun. Mia's first stop on her 45-day journey was a tiny seaside town, the kind you see in old postcards. Life there moved at a different pace. Fishermen were pulling in their nets, their muscles straining with a rhythm as old as the tides. Waves gently brushed against the sand, erasing and redrawing the shoreline. Stray dogs slept lazily in patches of sun outside tiny, colorful shops. The air smelled of salt and possibility. Every morning, without fail, she would kick off her shoes and walk barefoot along the water's edge, feeling the cool, wet sand squish between her toes. It was a simple act, but it grounded her in a way she hadn't felt in years. And every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, she would sit down with her journal. But this time, she didn't write about deadlines, or emails, or the suffocating stress of her old life. Instead, her pages filled with descriptions of colors, the scent of blooming flowers mixed with the sea, the sound of distant laughter, and the invisible shape of the wind as it rustled through the palm trees. She was learning to see the world again. On her third day in this peaceful haven, as she was walking back from the beach with a fresh coconut smoothie in hand, she bumped squarely into someone. Not just anyone. It was him, the man from the train. He fumbled with his camera, a beautiful vintage-looking model, nearly dropping it. She juggled her smoothie, a splash of white liquid sloshing over the side. For a moment, they both just stood there, wide-eyed. Then, they burst out laughing. It was a genuine, unforced laugh that echoed in the quiet street. They exchanged quick, flustered apologies and then, just as quickly, parted ways. Another coincidence? Or was this something else? A gentle nudge from the universe, perhaps. As the days turned into a week, Mia knew she couldn't stay in one place forever. Her journey was about movement, about discovery. So, she packed her small bag and kept moving. She ventured through other small towns, each with its own unique charm. She hiked across breathtaking mountain passes, where the air was thin and crisp, and the silence was profound. She found herself wandering through the serene grounds of ancient temples, feeling the weight of centuries of prayer and meditation. She sat in lonely bus stations at odd hours, watching people come and go, each one a universe of stories she would never know, but whose presence she felt all the same. And everywhere she went, It seemed the world had a lesson waiting for her, delivered through the strangers she met. There was a grandmother running a tiny roadside tea shop, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles. As she served Mia a steaming cup of chai, she looked at her with kind eyes and said, "Child, life is long. Don't rush it. Walk slowly." The words were simple, but they settled deep in Mia's soul. Later, she gave a ride to a young hitchhiker with a worn-out backpack and a spirit that shone brighter than the sun. He was traveling with no destination in mind, just a desire to see where the road would take him. He told her something that completely shifted her perspective. "You don't find purpose," he said, looking out at the passing landscape. "That's not how it works. You just live enough days. Really live them, and eventually, your purpose finds you." In another town, tucked away on a quiet side street, she found a cafe where the owner, a man with tired eyes but gentle hands, played the piano every single night. Sometimes the cafe was empty, save for Mia. She asked him why he played with such passion, even when there was no audience. He smiled a soft, melancholic smile. "I play," he explained, "because my heart needs to hear itself." He didn't need applause. He just needed to express the music that was inside him. With each encounter, a powerful realization began to dawn on Mia. The world was full of people who had been lost, just like her. People who had felt broken, who had stumbled and fallen, and they had all survived. They had found their own ways to heal, their own quiet rhythms, their own music. She wasn't alone in her struggle. She was just one traveler on a very old road. But there was another, stranger thread weaving its way through her journey. The man from the train. He kept appearing. It was uncanny. She'd be sipping coffee in a bustling market, and she'd glance over to see him at a neighboring shop, sketching in a notepad. She'd be hiking a difficult trail, and she'd spot him far ahead, a lone figure against the mountains. Once, she was about to miss her bus, running to the station at the last minute, and there he was, holding the door for her, offering a small, knowing smile. They rarely spoke more than a few words at a time. A simple hello, a shared joke about the weather, a quiet, mutual appreciation of a spectacular sunset. They never exchanged names. They never asked where the other was from or where they were going. It was an unspoken agreement. They were two strangers, two comets orbiting the same sun, their paths crossing at just the right moments, unknowingly pulling each other forward on their separate, yet parallel, journeys. Mia couldn't explain it, but his presence was a comfort. It felt like the universe had assigned her a quiet guardian, someone to watch over her from a respectful distance. It made the world feel a little less vast, a little less lonely. And somewhere along those winding roads, somewhere between the mountains and the sea, something incredible happened. Mia began to smile again. Not the polite, forced smile she used to wear like a mask, but a real, genuine smile. A smile that reached her eyes. A smile she hadn't seen on her own face in years. The healing had begun. On the 45th and final day of her journey, Mia arrived at her destination. It was a mountain peak, a place where she hoped to witness a sunrise painted in shades of gold she had only ever seen in her dreams. The climb began long before dawn. The air was crisp and cold, a sharp contrast to the warmth she hoped to find within herself. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves under her feet. Below, the world was still asleep, tucked under a thick, soft blanket of mist. As she reached the summit, breathing hard, her eyes adjusted to the pre-dawn light. And there he was, already waiting, sitting alone at the very edge of the cliff, looking out into the vast, dark expanse. He turned as he heard her approach, a flicker of surprise in his eyes that quickly softened into a gentle, familiar smile. "You," again," he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. She sat down beside him, leaving a comfortable space between them. Two strangers who had crossed paths far too many times to truly be strangers anymore. They had seen each other in bustling city squares, quiet seaside cafes, and dusty, forgotten train stations. Each time, a brief, silent acknowledgement passed between them. A shared understanding of being on a similar, solitary path. Now, here they were, at the top of the world, together. They watched in shared silence as the sky began to wake up. Soft, blush pinks bled into streaks of fiery orange. The orange deepened, then slowly, gloriously, turned into a pure, brilliant light that pushed back the darkness. The mist below began to glow, turning the valley into a sea of liquid gold. It was a spectacle of nature so profound, so breathtaking, that it felt like a private show just for the two of them. After a long, comfortable silence, broken only by the waking birds, he spoke. "I didn't expect anyone to find me up here." His voice was low, carrying a hint of introspection. Mia laughed, a soft, gentle sound that seemed to dance in the cool morning air. "I didn't expect to find myself up here," she replied, her gaze still fixed on the horizon, where the sun was now a perfect, radiant orb. He turned to look at her, a real smile finally gracing his lips. It wasn't the fleeting, polite smile from their previous encounters. This one was warm, sincere, and it reached his eyes. "You look happier," he observed. "Happier than when I first saw you." She finally turned to look at him, really look at him, and asked the question that had been lingering in her mind for weeks. "Why were you always around?" He shrugged, his gaze turning thoughtful as he looked back toward the sunrise. "I guess I was searching too." "For," answered, "for direction." He paused, letting the words hang in the air between them before adding, "For myself." And in that single, honest confession, everything clicked into place for Mia. The pieces of the puzzle that had been scattered across her 45-day journey suddenly formed a clear, beautiful picture. They had been traveling together all along, without ever planning to. They were two parallel lines that kept intersecting, two solitary travelers whose paths were inexplicably intertwined. They had been helping each other heal, providing a silent, steady presence in the background of each other's quest for self-discovery. Two lives, quietly touching, without ever asking for anything in return. He was the anchor she didn't know she needed, a quiet reminder that she wasn't the only one feeling lost. As the sun rose fully, washing the mountains in a spectacular, warm gold, he spoke again, his voice filled with a quiet sincerity. "Meeting you, it made this journey less heavy." Mia felt her heart swell, not with the flutter of romance, but with a deep, profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for this shared, unspoken companionship. For the silent support of a fellow wanderer. "With you around," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind, "I never felt alone." They shared one last moment of silence. It was the kind of silence that says everything words cannot. Silence filled with mutual respect, understanding, and a quiet farewell to the people they used to be. It was a perfect, unspoken conclusion to their shared chapter. When they climbed back down the mountain, the world now fully awake and bathed in sunlight, they finally exchanged names. A simple introduction, something most people do in the first few seconds of meeting. But for them, it felt like closing a circle, like putting a final, gentle seal on their shared experience. At the bus station at the foot of the mountain, their paths finally, officially, parted. He was heading north, she was heading south, different cities, different lives, and entirely new stories waiting to be written. As Mia boarded her bus and found a seat by the window. She watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared into the crowd. But she didn't feel a pang of sadness or loss. She only felt a deep, abiding peace. She had learned one of the most important lessons of her journey. Some people are not meant to stay in our lives forever. They appear for a season, a reason, to walk alongside us just long enough to help us find the version of ourselves we thought we had lost. In 45 days, Mia had crossed mountains and coastlines, bustling towns and unfamiliar, lonely roads. But the longest, most arduous distance she traveled was the one inside her own heart. And somewhere along that journey, a stranger walking in the same direction, searching for his own light, helped her find her way back to herself. Thank you for watching this story. Please give me a like and subscribe to support me, and so you won't miss the next stories.